All right, first rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be after waivers for week 10 heading into week 11. This is where I'm sitting around being proactive, drinking my coffee at midnight while my league mates are in bed. So in general, I do want to talk about this, the difference between Tony Pollard last year being a bust and Tony Pollard this year being a league winner, that fine line where statistically he's basically the same guy this year to last year. So he's probably going to have about like 200 more yards rushing if it remains somewhat consistent. That remember, part of that is going to come down to the fact that Tajay Spears missed some time with the hamstring. He went full bell cow. But again, he's actually on pace for less than 6 rushing touchdowns through 9 games, and then his receptions and his receiving yards are looking like they're going to be down. So last year, bust Tony Pollard, not converting on all those red zone opportunities attached to a good offense is equal to somewhat full bell cow Tony Pollard this year being attached to a bad offense. That's just how fantasy goes. Sometimes when we're chasing some of those numbers and the right type of numbers to be chasing when it gets down to it. All right. Let's see. Week 11, I got to scroll back up to my notes. Week 11 buys, you're looking at the Giants, the Cardinals, the Buccaneers, and the Panthers. Week 12 buys, you're looking at the Falcons, the Bills, the Bengals, the Saints, the Jets, and the Jags. Defenses to be stashing ahead of time in week 12 if you can get a hold of them. Detroit going up against the Colts is probably a good one. And Minnesota going up against the Bears right now, if you can get those ones. The Dolphins are probably going to be available going up against the Patriots. The Buccaneers may be a roll against the Giants. The Redskins going up against the Cowboys right now. You could look at that. Chiefs, if they get dropped for some magical reason, going up against the Panthers. And the Texans going up against the Titans. I believe the Texans, if they're available, they would be one of the ones be spending on because they're playing the Cowboys this week. So if you have the ability to pay for them going into waivers tonight, taking advantage of them for next week. Also, Denver going up against the Raiders would be another one. There's a lot of good ones to be rolling out there, and then that would be about it for the defense I'd be chasing in this week 12 with all the teams that are going to be going on buys. All right. Starting off with the 49ers. So CMC, he goes full bell cow in his first game back. So the idea that they were going to slowly but surely integrate CMC into the offense, 88% snaps, 13 for 39, 7 for 6 for 68. Both Jordan Mason and Isaac Garriendo were at 5% snaps. Only one opportunity apiece. Isaac Garriendo did have the red zone opportunity. So Kyle Juszczyk's snaps were down to 39% snaps with 0 opportunities. And I was wondering how the 49ers I shouldn't say the 49ers, how the Buccaneers were able to keep the game relatively close, considering like how bad they were on offense. And that was because of 3 missed field goals when it comes to the 49ers. So take some of this in it with a grain of salt. Like the 49ers were sort of controlling the game. And you're looking at them running a lot of 3 wide receivers was not something they normally do. So Debo was at 78% snaps, 6 for 5 for 62, another 3 for 14 rushing, a red zone opportunity, 32 air, 37 yak. I imagine that's what his role is going to stay for the rest of the year. So like I would probably be looking at downgrading him into even wide receiver 3 territory because of some of the other stuff we're going to talk about. Jawan Jennings steps in and he's rolling as the X, replacing Brandon Ayuk. 91% snaps, 11 for 7 for 93 in this one, 84 air, 36 yak. In this one, 2 red zone opportunities. Ricky Pearsall, and this is kind of a little bit more of the surprising thing that they were running like so much 3 wide receivers. 64% snaps, 6 for 4 for 73, a touchdown, red zone opportunity in this one, 62 air, 35 yak. And again, like if the offense is changing towards 3 wide receivers because these are their best players, looking forward to that. Part of the reason why I would necessarily downgrade Debo is on a week-to-week basis, like understanding where any of these opportunities are going to go. You're also looking at Kittle doing 89% snaps, 2 red zone targets. He tugged on one of them. I believe he is dealing with a hamstring injury right now. Probably would upgrade like the wide receivers. If he misses, I wouldn't be chasing the wide receiver, the second tight end when it comes to the 49ers, at least for a week. But again, the overall usage of those guys, like good luck guessing like who's going to get used and where. It's going to also cut into the theoretical upside if you want to be like chasing after a guy who has the weekly upside to win you a league week. I don't think any of these guys are going to be able to do it. And then you're going to also be guessing like on any given week, they all can have sub 40-degree days. Looking at all that stuff. All right, moving on to the Bears. Not a real football channel. I did see today that the entirety of the offensive staff, like not including the offensive line coach, got fired today. What's that mean? I don't know, because some of the stuff that's going on definitely has to do with like Caleb Williams. Like these are things that were observable from Caleb Williams coming out of college that haven't been fixed. Now, hopefully, like new coaches can fix some of that stuff, but some of it probably isn't going to get fixed this year when we're looking at it. DeAndre Swift was at 67% snaps. He did have 2 red zone opportunities in this one, 17 total opportunities. DJ Moore, 6 targets. Keenan Allen was at 6 targets. Rome was at 6 targets. Rome's snaps were down to 68% snaps. Rome would probably be the only guy I'd really want to be rolling out in this offense on a week-to-week basis. That would be based off of what I paid for him. You're probably rolling out DJ Moore, even though he's downgraded at this point. Keenan Allen is probably like capped overall when it comes to this like ceiling. Rome led everybody again in air yard 67 to Keenan Allen's 39 and DJ Moore's 27. Cole Kmet did have 4 targets. And again, like being able to guess how the offense is going to function with a coaching change, like good luck on that one. Moving on, I'll talk about the Bengals for so chasing certain numbers. If you want to know what like crazy numbers sound like from a fantasy perspective, Jamar Chase, 239 air yards, 103 yak. So that means like when he caught the shorter ones, he was able to turn them into something. 2 red zone opportunities, and then that turned into 17 for 11, 262 or 264 and 3 touchdowns. So again, chasing certain numbers. Why chasing some of those numbers is kind of important. Andre Yosivas, 84% snaps. Jermaine Burton with T. Higgins being out, 48% snaps, 5 for 1 for 11. 82 air yards, 2 red zone opportunities. So if T misses again, he would be in wide receiver 3 dart throw range. And I did see still day-to-day when it comes to T. Higgins. I think I saw someplace on Twitter that they are expecting that he may show up to practice at some point this week. But, and here's the but, now I think about it, week 12 bye. Would not be surprised that they just hold him out for another week. The other thing is with the direction that their season is going, they may end up having to roll him out because like they can't lose any more games when it comes down to this. This stuff to be looking at. Now, the other thing is when it comes to the Bengals and their tight ends, I was expecting Tanner McLaughlin would just step in and for Eric All, who went on IR. That didn't happen. They actually elevated Cam Grandy up to the active roster, and then Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson, they rolled like Drew Sample's the blocking tight end. Tanner Hudson's kind of the receiving tight end. 35% snaps, 7 for 6 for 42. And a touchdown. He was also the guy that the target went to on the missed 2-point play. Gesicki's snaps jumped all the way up to 91% snaps, 9 for 4 for 30. And then you're also looking at 2 red zone opportunities, 88 air yards. The bigger thing is the 88 air yards. So again, if you can guess against the Chargers, that's going to be a slower game. It probably projects to be a neutral pace game. If T. Higgins is out, this would be the week that I would be chasing Mike Gesicki if you can get all that stuff to land all together. Bills. So James Cook, and I was thinking about this. So James Cook is theoretically, statistically, the right guy, except I've totally forgot that they have Josh Allen as the guy who vultures a certain amount of rushing work rushing touchdowns when it comes to the ability for James Cook to be elevated into RB1 land. So 55% snaps, 19 for 80, rushing touchdowns, 3 for 1 for 5. All 6 red zone opportunities went to him. That didn't go to Josh Allen. Ty Johnson was at 30% snaps. Ray Davis was at 15% snaps. 3 carries for Ray Davis, 3 targets for Ty Johnson. I imagine that they're going to split the work up if James Cook goes down, if you're wondering about that. So I don't think you're going to get like full bell cow Ray Davis, but I still think that he should be held on to. With Amari Cooper out, Keon Coleman out. Now, Amari Cooper is tracking potentially to play this week if you're wondering about that type of thing. There's a possibility that he could play. Keon Coleman, on the other hand, has already been ruled out. So some of this stuff, like take this with a grain of salt when it comes down to it. So Khalil Shakur was at 78 or 72% snaps in this one. 9 for 6 for 58. I didn't write down the air yards. Matt Collins at 88% snaps, 4 for 4 for 86 in this one. And then the main one to be taking advantage of, depending on your league size, and the if Amari Cooper misses, and we're also looking at the possibility of Dalton Kincaid missing. 89% snaps. Curtis Samuel 8 for 4 for 35, and a red zone opportunity to go along with 59 air yards. I believe he led all the wide receivers when it comes to air yards. That's why I probably wrote that down. Tight end wise with Dalton Kincaid, no news. So he did get knocked out of the game on his 24% snaps and 5 targets, and then he brought himself back in and took himself out and said he couldn't protect himself. This would move Dawson Knox into streamer range, regardless of who is or is not available when it comes to like Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. All right, the Broncos. So the Broncos were in a knife fight when it comes to the Chiefs, and this kind of matters when we look at like some of the game flow when it comes to Javonte Williams and the usage flop when it comes to these guys. Like I talked about this in Chasing the Dragon. I would have my expectations of Audric Estime muted. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't be somewhat excited to be chasing him, this late in the season to be able to get a usage flop, to be able to take advantage of that. This is stuff that I would be chasing. It just means that like I don't think you're going to get a certain amount of design receiving work for Audric Estime. I did hear today that Javonte did run more routes than Estime did, and he did have the red zone opportunity. I did write that down. Estime was at 45% snaps. 14 for 53. Jaleel McLaughlin was at 12% snaps. Probably the bigger thing out of all this is Jaleel McLaughlin's snaps went down, and Javonte's snaps went down slightly, even though Javonte still might get the better opportunities with this, and then like you're buying some type of volume based like RB2. The bigger thing is if he's not going to get the red zone opportunities, that's going to be what hurts him the most. When it comes to the Broncos wide receivers, I don't care that about anybody not named Courtland Sutton. 9 for 6 for 70, touchdown, 97 air yards. Yeah, that's the long and short of that. The one thing that I will bring up if you are in dynasty leagues and you're wondering about this, a little interesting. 22% snaps for Marvin Williams, but he does do 4 for 4 for 13 in this one, and one of those was a red zone opportunity. And I don't care about the tight ends. Adam Troutman led everybody in snaps. Lucas Kroll does appear to have a certain amount of like design work when it comes down to him. Like I said, I don't particularly care. Still buying pieces of the Browns offense if they're available in your league. You're looking at Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore primarily if they're going to be available on your waiver wire. Sip of water. All right, Buccaneers. So, and I already talked about this. The Niners missed 3 field goals. That's why they were able to stay in the game in this one. And then with those vacated targets, I'll talk a little bit more about this when I get to the Rams. Like Mike Evans still targeting to come back week 12. Obviously, if you can't stretch the field vertically, and that either means through speed or with like some type of contested catch bully, teams can just sit. And if you don't have the ability to like score, from outside of range, like I always told like the kids that I coach, like defense technically gets to play with 13 guys because they get the 2 sidelines. And then when you get in the red zone, you get a 14th guy, and that's the back of the end zone. So like if you don't have the ability to score from outside of the red zone, it just compresses everything when you get down there. It gets harder to score. On top of the fact that like if you don't have the ability to force teams to respect you being able to like throw up like jump balls one way or another, the 50-50 balls that they talk about, teams will just sit on everything underneath, and then you get this like really inefficient offense that like technically you can sustain like completions, the check down monster work, and just force guys to come up and tackle. So in this one, you're looking at Trey Palmer down to 25% snaps, 1 target. Jalen McMillan was active, no snaps, which is not surprising with that hamstring. Sterling Shepard was at 72% snaps, 3 targets. Ryan Miller and Raheem Jarrett. So we were right on these guys. 82% snaps. He did have a red zone target in this game. Like they just weren't pulling the trigger on these guys. And then Ryan Miller, he was at 85% snaps, 3 targets, and he led all the wide receivers in areas with 43. In this one, they just weren't trying to push it down the field. Cade Otton, he 8 for 5 for 35 red zone target in this one. With Mike Evans coming back, it's going to obviously downgrade him. It just becomes an issue of like how far he gets downgraded. Still could stay the number 2. It just depends with like Jalen McMillan when he comes back, if he ends up being the number 2 in the offense. And the other thing is also going to have a certain amount of red zone opportunity is not going to go to Cade Otton. What partially makes him valuable right now is he's getting red zone opportunity. He's going to lose red zone opportunity. He's going to lose opportunity in general if Jalen McMillan is the number 2 in the offense. Running backs, and this is part of the reason why I like be a little concerned when it comes to like your Cade Ottons. Rashad White, he's 61% snaps, 10 for 31, 7 for 6 for 39, scores a touchdown. He did have 2 red zone carries, and then he tugged on his 1 red zone target. Bucky Irving, 46% snaps, 13 for 73, 3 for 3 for 14, 3 red zone carries. He tugged on one of those and a red zone target. So they're both RB2s. I wouldn't overthink it. Like their usage says they're RB2s. I don't particularly think that either one of them or is any more or any less valuable from a fantasy perspective when it comes down to that. All right, moving on to the Cardinals, and then like talking about like the fickleness of the fantasy gods. So the Cardinals blow out the Bears last week. Kyler does like 4 points. The Cardinals blow out the Jets this week. He falls in the end zone twice. He throws a touchdown pass. He does 28 points. Again, your scoring settings may be different than mine. From a running back perspective, James Conner, 54% snaps, 12 for 33. He tugs, 5 for 5 for 80. He led everybody in the passing game this week. You're looking at, let's see, I pull him up. All 3 red zone opportunities, he went to him in this game. I did look this up with the game flow. Trey Benson was being worked in before this was a complete blowout. So 27% snaps, 10 for 62, 2 for 2 for 25. And the bigger news is, the usage flop has happened. DeMarcado was down to 12% snaps with the blowout. Only other stuff to talk about, Marvin Harrison did get a red zone target. He tugged on that. And then Trey McBride's snaps were down to like 71%. And again, this is because of the blowout. Tip Rima was up to 59% snaps. Like the bigger news with all that is like, take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. They blew out the Jets. The Chargers, and they kind of blew out the Titans. And I did look this up ahead of time. So Justin Herbert, 9 for 32 and a touchdown. He throws a touchdown pass. Only 18 pass attempts in this game because they were blowing out the Titans. This stretch of games, Bengals, Ravens, Falcons are pretty good to be rolling out your toys, not named J.K. Dobbins in this offense. Now, the other thing is you're going to be looking at a coin flip when it comes to Kansas City and a coin flip when it comes to the Buccaneers. The Broncos and the Pats are probably not very good when it comes to predictive games when it comes to like rolling out your Chargers shares. Now, Gus Edwards, 25% snaps, 10 for 55 in this one. Let's see, I got to pull this up. You're also looking at 4 red zone carries in this game. He was being worked in early. J.K. Dobbins, the efficiency was down again. 15 for 50, 66% snaps, 3 for 3 for 5. 2 red zone carries for him, 1 red zone target. Hassan Hoskins, the third string running back, 8% snaps, 2 red zone carries. He tugged on one of those late, if you're wondering about that. Ladd McConkey was at 78% snaps, only 2 targets, again because of the game flow. Quentin Johnson was at 83% snaps, 1 red zone target. He tugged on that. Bigger news, Josh Palmer's down 53% snaps. So like because of the stretch of games that you're going to be looking at with the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Falcons, that's going to mean that like Ladd McConkey is probably a wide receiver 2, and Quentin Johnson is probably like a very close to a weekly role during that period based off of just overall snap share. All right, and I don't care about the Chargers tight ends if you're wondering about that, and Will Disley's 6% or 6 targets. Moving on to the Chiefs, and not a real football channel, so I did see the statistical improbability of the Chiefs being undefeated at this point in the season. So to start off all this, Isaiah Pacheco's window to return was open today. Now, I bring this up because I did talk to one of my co-managers who is in the medical profession, and before I started running my mouth about saying, like, I didn't think he was going to play again this year, he looked into what was going on. He said, yeah, I don't think he's going to come back this year. So, like, this is a little surprising, but the rumors were saying that he was projected for Week 12, and we can still look like he's going to be ready for Week 12. Now, is there going to be a ramp-up period? I would still guess maybe. The guy that I think is going to be most hurt by this is Carson Steele. He'd be the guy that I would project to be towards inactive if everybody stays healthy. P. Ryan was at 24% snaps. Sneal was at 19% snaps. Hunt in this one, he was at 65% snaps, 14 for 35, 10 for 7 for 65 in the passing game. 4 red zone carries, 4 red zone targets. So, at least for the foreseeable future, Like you're still probably getting very close to an RB1 if you can get some type of consistency in the passing game. I don't think that's going to be remain consistent. It's mostly going to be the red zone work that I would be looking at. Uh, DeAndre Hopkins in this one, his snaps didn't go up significantly. He was only at 65% snaps. I bring this guy up right here. So he's only at 65% snaps, 5 for 4 for 56, only 38 air yards and a red zone target. So this is what I kind of was warning about last week when it comes to expecting how much of that was going to remain consistent. And if he doesn't get the red zone tug because they went someplace else, like, yeah, you're going to get that, like, 40-degree day, sub 40-degree day, however you want to break that down. When it goes to Xavier Worthy, he got an uptick in the offense. So maybe we can start talking about him being a dart throw. 75% snaps, 4 targets in this one. He did have 59 air yards and a red zone opportunity. Let's see. Justin Watson was at 76% snaps. No news on Juju and his hammy. Quote unquote, very close is what they said. Justin Ross, this is probably a little bit more from a dynasty perspective. 10% snaps, did have a red zone opportunity also. Travis Kelce, 12 targets, 3 red zone opportunities. He tugs. Noah Gray, 57% snaps. All right, moving on to the Colts. So the Joe Flacco is to remain the starter. We can start breaking down a little bit of, I'll just go over the running backs real quick. Jonathan Taylor, he did get a touchdown vultured by Alec Pierce, or Alec Goodson, if you're wondering, or Tyler Goodson. That's what the name I was looking for. He did get a red zone target. He did score on that one. And then wide receivers. So right now, Michael Pittman, he's out. There's no news on what's going to happen with him going into week 11. So take all the rest of this with a grain of salt when we come to tracking these guys. Now, Josh Downs, he was at 69% snaps, 10 for 7 for 72 in this game. You're also looking at 3 red zone targets, 74 air yards. Probably should not be overthinking about whether or not you should be rolling him out there. Alec Pierce is going to stay as a dart throw. Again, this is all predicated on Michael Pittman being out. 86% snaps, 7 for 4 for 81, and a touchdown. 2 red zone targets. He did tug on one of those, 118 air yards. So that's like a weekly wide receiver 3. And then Adonai Mitchell would be the one guy that I would be chasing if he's available. I may have to roll him out either this week in my high school league or next week in my main money league, especially if Michael Pittman's going to remain out. 94% snaps, so by snap share, he's the wide receiver 1. 6 for 6 for 71, and this one only 52 air yards. But again, I can imagine that that's going to have a little bit of variance on a week-to-week basis. All right, moving on to the Redskins. So Jaden Daniels, he did disappoint, didn't have any touchdowns in this one. There was like 3 rushing touchdowns that were punched in from the 1-yard line, if you're wondering about that. Running back wise, like B-Rob, I did see that like they're expecting that he is going to miss this week. I did see that on Twitter. That's what the rumors are saying. Stays limited in walkthrough. So be advised when it comes to that. Austin Eckler does 70% snaps in this one, 13 for 44, 2 touchdowns. Bring this up. He did have 5 red zone opportunities. He did tug on 2 of those. McNichols touchdown that he vultured. 30% snaps, 4 for 7, and for 1 that was a red zone vulture. If you're wondering about that, Scary Terry, he's still going to be like fringe wide receiver 1 because of usage. Now again, like talking about like why guys like when they get like really valuable, 65 air yards, 54 yak. That means like he can take anything that he catches short and turn it into something special. And then he also had a red zone opportunity in this one. He didn't convert that, but like put all that together, that's what makes him very close to a wide receiver 1 this year. That's why he's going to end up being a league winner at this point. 6 for 5 for 113. Noah Brown, again, in your deeper leagues, he's going to remain a dart throw because of the snap share and the targets. 89% snaps, 7 targets in this one, also 73 air yards. Did get a little bit of a bump in Luke McCaffrey. This is probably like for next year. 41% snaps, 3 for 1 for 23, 64 air yards. That's probably the bigger jump on him. Zach Ertz, red zone target on his 8 targets. Again, he's probably going to remain a weekly streamer if you need to be rolling him out there. Again, 8 targets and a red zone target to go along with that. The Cowboys, they were blown out by the Eagles. This was kind of like comically bad. It was so bad I had to go actually like watch the snaps when it comes to like Cooper Rush, and some of them are just not close. And that's on top of the fact that like The 13 for 45, that's like no yak. That's all check down stuff. 2 fumbles lost. Not good when it, I shouldn't, internet man does not have to tell you, like, not good for when it comes to his toys. Now, Dak, he is going to be out with that hamstring surgery that I guess he had today. And then that means, like, depending on what you need, and look at who else needs quarterback in your league, you're looking at like stashing or blocking with the Trey Lance because he has the rushing upside. Doesn't really matter from what he's going to do for the toys. It's all going to be when it comes down to him. Now, again, this was a blowout. Zeke, 22% snaps, did have 3 red zone opportunities. Rico Dowdle, 52% snaps, 12 for 53, 3 for 3 for 2 red zone opportunities. So he should probably be rolled outside of, if you're chasing upside, he's probably going to be very limited, but like overall opportunities, like he would be an RB2. CeeDee Lamb, 10 targets, only 21 yards on that. Both the red zone opportunities went to him. No news on Brandon Cooks in this one, and that knee injury. Not that it really matters. And then Jalen Tolbert, 93% snaps, 72 air yards, 5 targets. Again, probably wouldn't be trusting any of these guys as long as Cooper Rush is the quarterback. Like, maybe, probably wouldn't even trust them if they bring in Trey Lance. Let's see. Jonathan Mingo was a healthy scratch, traded over from the Panthers, if you're wondering. Jake Ferguson in this one, 7 targets, but again, like, just massive downgrade. He did lose a fumble on top of that. All right, Dolphins on Monday Night Football. Main thing to be looking at, I would say, like, is the running back usage. So A-Chain, 70% snaps, 5 targets. That's like the biggest thing that I would be looking at. Didn't write down any red zone opportunities when it comes to the running back, so I don't think there were any for those. Was a usage flop, if you're wondering. So Raheem Mostert was used on 3rd down. I did see that on Twitter, so it's just not me stealing it off of Sleeper. 3 for 2 for 34 on 15% snaps. And then Jalen Wright is like the breather back, 17% snaps, 5 for 3 to go along with this. Jeff Wilson was a healthy scratch. When it comes to the wide receivers, the main news on this one, Odell Beckham was at 32% snaps, 2 for 2 for 17. And this is like more from a dynasty perspective. I don't think this is going to matter probably for like 2 years. But Malik Washington, 34% snaps, 2 for 1 for 17, and did score on a 18-yard rushing touchdown. And then Jonnu Smith was only at 43% snaps, so I don't care about the Dolphins tight ends. Eagles. So a lot of stuff to be if, buts, and maybes when it comes down to the Eagles. They do play on Thursday, so like kind of realize that. So hamstring, Devontae Smith supposedly limited today in practice. You're also going to be looking at Dallas Goedert, supposedly limited on Tuesday with an ankle. So that would mean that we could theoretically get our Grant Calcaterra spike week if we get both those guys being out this week. That would move him up into streamability. Let's see. And that's about all I have when it comes down to the blowout. One other thing that I would talk about is I was a little worried about Johnny Wilson, this red zone target. And I went and looked it up. 26% snaps. This was a scramble drill in the red zone. So the worry going into the season for me when it comes to the Eagles was that Johnny Wilson would take over as the big X in the offense and take away a certain amount of red zone opportunities. And so I thought this was a design play to him, and it wasn't. It was a scramble drill. So I'm not as worried about that overall. And then if you're wondering, I wouldn't care about Jahan Johnson in the offense. I think that you get like full bell cow AJ Brown if Devontae Smith is out. All right, moving on to the Falcons. So first foremost, Tyler Algier, only 23% snaps, 11 for 59 in this game, and then 3 red zone opportunities. So Bijan was at 78% snaps, 2 red zone opportunities. He tugged on one of those, and that was on top of his monster week, 20 for 116, and then another touchdown on top of that, 4 for 3 for 28. A little to talk about with Kyle Pitts because of Drake London, because of the running back usage, and then Drake London doing like 124 air yards, 3 red zone targets, 12 for 8 for 97, and then Darnell Mooney, you're looking at doing like 10 for 5 for 96, 168 air yards. Because of all the usage going around, especially like all the red zone opportunities not going to Kyle Pitts, he did have a red zone target in this game. on his limited amount of snaps. Again, they live in 3 wide receivers. He's at 51% snaps, 6 for 455, 70 air yards. Like, he's basically the number 4 in the offense, if not the number 5, with Tyler Algier getting like red zone opportunities to go along with this. This was a knife fight. That's how far I would move Kyle Pitts down on a week to week basis. Like, boom bust, like low end tight end one is where how I would view him overall. Now, the other thing to be looking at with the Falcons is Darnell Mooney. Like, I wouldn't overthink it. Like, he's probably going to be a league winner at the price that you paid for him. What I would say about Darnell Mooney is he's going to give you a certain amount of a sub 40-degree days when the opportunities go, like Bijan, Tyler Algier, Kyle Pitts, or Drake London. They're the guys that scores, or they're the guys that, like, vulture up all the opportunities. So there's a little bit of volatility to Darnell Mooney, even though he should probably be a weekly wide receiver 2 going forward. All right, did see with the Giants. The speculation is that Daniel Jones is done when it comes to the Giants. I did see that they are running practices. Brian Dable, the head coach, came out and said, like, they're not running a traditional script when it comes to who the starting quarterback is this week. Now, I don't necessarily think that Drew Lock is an upgrade to Daniel Jones. They're kind of different. Drew Lock is kind of a gunslinger and a little bit little inconsistent on the accuracy, and you could say that, like, Daniel Jones is a little too much of a game manager and a little inconsistent on where the football goes. So I don't know if it necessarily upgrades any of the toys when it comes down to being able to speculate. Tyrone Tracy, 80% snaps, 10 for 103, touchdown, 2 for 1 for 1, 2 fumbles. One of those was lost. That was in overtime. 3 red zone carries, 1 red zone target. Like, this is the league winner when it comes to, like, running backs coming off the wire right now. Now, the fumble in overtime, that would bother me, especially if they're going to be doing a quarterback change. I could see that they're not going to give some of the high value touches to Tyrone Tracy. That would be the 3 red zone carries and the 1 red zone target. I can see them going to Devil Singletary if they can't trust that he's going to hold on the football. I can also see that they're just like, hey, this is the guy that we're going to have going forward. This is really important that we just get the growing pains done, and they roll them out. So, like, just kind of, think about that ahead of time. Devin Singletary, 23% snaps, 8 for 40, 1 for 1 for 5 in this game. Malik Neighbors, and again, this would be the main thing about, like, a quarterback change. The theory behind Malik Neighbors going into the season is that he was going to be very volatile because, yes, he's talented. The offense is not going to be good, and then being able to predict, like, what his uses are going to be on a week-to-week basis. So 10 targets, 111 air yards. Wan'Dale Robinson was at 64 air yards. Darius Slayton was out, and then Jalen Hyatt was at 73% snaps. You are getting to the point where Theo Johnson is a fringe tight end 1, 92% snaps, 6 for 4 for 37 in this one, 47 air yards, which is not particularly bad for tight ends. So, like, if you're speculating on all the changes that could be going on in the Giants offense, can we get to the point where, like, Theo Johnson is the weekly number 2 in the offense from a passing game perspective? It's moving in that direction. All right, Jaguars. So Trevor Lawrence is out with his shoulder, and there's no news on that right now. The bigger issue is Mac Jones was so bad that, like, this downgrades, like, all the toys when it comes down to it. Now, tight or running backs, 68% snaps for Travis Etienne. Like, so he's back to being the starter. Red zone carry also went to him. Tank Bigsby right now, you're looking at dealing with an injury. I forget what, or ankle. That's what I have written down. That's what's going on with Tank Bigsby. Dearness Johnson was at 9% snaps in this game, so you might be getting another week of pretty close to, like, bell cow Travis Etienne if we can track that ahead of time. Wide receiver usage in this one, so Gabe Davis was at 88% snaps on his 4 targets. Or let me back this up. I'm reading my notes wrong. So 86% snaps. He did have 88 air yards on his 4 targets and a red zone target. So, like, he's back to, like, wide receiver 3, dart throw range. And then Brian Thomas, like, no idea. No idea on the 3 targets. Like, didn't even get targeted until the second half, I believe. And then Parker Washington was down to 52% snaps. No targets for him in this one. I want to check something, make sure I didn't write this down wrong. No. So this is from last week. All right, and then the big guy that was the uptick in all of this was Evan Ingram at 84% snaps, 8 for 6 for 40. He actually had, like, 53 air yards on his eight targets, which is, a little a little bit of an uptick normally for him. Brenton Strange was up to 41% snaps, 3 for 1 for 25 in this game. All right, moving on to the Jets again, like not a real fantasy football channel. I think I talked about this in Sausage. Talking to my co-managers about like Breece Hall, if you would have told me Breece Hall was a disappointment because the Jets were good, I would believe you. If you would have told me like Breece Hall is going to be a disappointment because the Jets are that bad, I wouldn't believe you after like last year with the quarterback situation going on for the Jets. So Breece Hall, 81% snaps, 10 for 52, 4 for 4 for 31 in this game. Red zone carry, red zone target. Braylon Allen did have a red zone target on his 24 or red zone carry on his 24% snaps. I don't have a lot to say about how bad the Jets were in this game with the Cardinals. 2 red zone targets for Garrett Wilson, 4 red zone targets to Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams was like very inefficient. Did see 13 targets in this game. So who knows? Let's see. Moving on to the Lions, Jared Goff throws 5 picks and they won the game. Jahmyr Gibbs was at 60% snaps in this one. I imagine, and then again, like they were down and they were able to claw their way back into it. I imagine most of your weeks you're going to get about like 60% Jahmyr Gibbs and 40% Montgomery, which I think is like what I would imagine they're going to be, something along those lines. Did get 2 red zone opportunities for David Montgomery. He tugged on one of those, fumble not lost. So I think that would be generally consistent with a neutral to positive game script for the Lions going forward. Now, the other thing is like they don't care about my fantasy lineup. The red zone or the Sun God did score on a red zone tug. Jameson Williams, and again, like guys that you're going to have a difficult time predicting on a week-to-week basis. So he's back from suspension, 74% snaps, 5 for 353, 140 air yards. So like, yeah, chase that. Sam Laporte is dealing with a shoulder. He did have 2 red zone opportunities. He did tug on one of those guys. I wouldn't be chasing Brock Wright. You're probably looking at those vacate targets being absorbed by Jahmyr Gibbs first and the Sun God second. Not that you can predict what's going on with the Lions this year. Let's see. Moving on to the Packers, and I did see some news potentially on Marshawn Lloyd. Did have his practice window opened, if you're wondering about that. Let's see. Moving on, and then no news that I saw on Luke Musgrave and his theoretical practice window. So no news on that one. Panthers. Bryce Young is probably always going to have a low ADOT. Because that's just kind of I think how he functions coming out of college. He I think there's a lot of predetermining what he does, and if he doesn't like something, he's just gonna check it down. I think that's gonna hurt everybody in the offense of the chasing after the receivers the rest of the year. So Chuba Hubbard 5 red zone carries in this game. Bigger news would be like Miles Sanders. Whatever's going on with him, he went and saw a specialist. This is going to be coming out of their bye, and then Jonathan Brooks is probably going to get activated. So again, like. Your guess is going to be good with mine, like what his usage is going to be with Chuba and that contract and all that stuff going on. Xavier Leggett was at 98% snaps, 4 for 3 for 40. The bigger news would be Jalen Coker jumping up to 88% snaps, 8 for 3 for 41. 82 air yards and a red zone opportunity. And then this is why I talk about like Bryce Young. I went and watched all of his targets. Like some of these were not catchable. So like the 8 targets, like yeah, they weren't necessarily about his route running. It's just like this, they just weren't there in general. Now David Moore was at 83% snaps, and I kind of bring this up because you're going to be guessing on who's going to be the odd man out with Adam Thielen coming back from IR right now. 83% snaps, 4 for 2 for 18. Did have a red zone target. Like I don't know if Coker is going to end up being the X. I wouldn't necessarily say Leggett's going to be the X. Old man Adam Thielen is probably more of the power slot, activated off of IR. So like trying to guess what like the wide receivers are going to look like maybe chase Jalen Coker, maybe don't, is the way to look at that. Let's see. Jatavion Sanders in this one. 88% snaps in this one. Did have a red zone, 2 red zone targets. He did tug on one of those. Again, like I just don't think there's going to be enough of the Panthers passing game to really predict anything. Like maybe be chasing those 8 targets when it comes to Coker. I can imagine that Thielen comes in and just removes Coker from the offense. If you're wondering about that, Pats. Ramondre was at 70% snaps, 20 for 74, uh, 1 for 3, 7 red zone carries in this game. Like ugly wider or running back two. Gibson was at 15 or 11% snaps, 5 for 26, two red zone carries, and then Jamichael Hasty, he jumps back up 19% snaps, 6 for 4 for 20, or 6 for 20, 1 for 1 for 4 in this game. Kind of a blowout of the Bears because of how bad the Bears are. The guy to be chasing in the offense, and I talked about this, I think, last week, still Kayshon Boutte, 97% snaps, 6 for 4 for 47 in this one. You are looking at 117 air yards. So, like, that would be the guy to have that spike week if you're wondering about that. Pop Douglas in this game, down to 42% snaps, 5 for 4 for 50. So that's why I would be generally saying if you want to be chasing a guy, would be Boutte in this offense. Polk was at 41% snaps, red zone opportunity. He tugged on that. Kendrick Bourne was actually a healthy scratch, which is a little interesting coming off of the ACL, and then they activated him. This is all stuff that tells me that like this is a franchise that doesn't really know what they're doing right now. And then Javon Baker did get a sighting, second week in a row of 6% snaps. I would imagine at a certain point they're gonna roll him out there and see what they got. Just give him the week. KJ Osborne was at 45% snaps, did have a red zone target. Again, they don't know what they're doing. Hunter Henry did have a red zone target, if you're wondering about that. I got no news when it comes to the Raiders. Nothing on Michael Mayer, if you're wondering about that. And then also, like, I don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be when it comes to them. No news on any of that stuff. All right, Rams on Monday night. I did talk a little bit about like what happens when you don't have a vertical threat on the field because like uh, Puka and Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson, I would not necessarily say are vertical type guys. I think they can play that role if you have a quarterback that's a little surprising that like Matt Stafford wouldn't push it vertically, but again, like this is all like pre-snap stuff where they make determinations based off of like what the shell looks like, stuff like that going on. So anyway, did see that Blake Corum in, let's see my notes, rotated on the third drive, like he was in for the first two series of the third drive, and then they forgot about him. 7% snaps, 2 for 8, 1 for 1 for 7. The rest of the way, all Kyron Williams, like 93% snaps, 15 for 62, 6 for 5 in this game. Fumble lost, and he got the only red zone opportunity. So like this again is telling me like coaches are just generally not paying attention to whatever they're doing. That Blake Corum went in the game. I couldn't find anything that something was going on like with Kyron Williams, why he just randomly went in the game again, and they forgot about him. Wide receiver wise, Puka 79% snaps, 14 for 9 for 98, 2 red zone opportunities, 119 air. And then Cooper Kupp, 90% snaps, 7 for 7 for 80. And then Demarcus Robinson, 83% snaps, 5 for 1 for 23, 2 red zone opportunities. So again, he's going to stay in that wide receiver 3 range. Again, the value of the vertical threat, the explosive play, 5 field goals, 6 field goal attempts for the Rams in this game. And some of this, like they got to be able to convert on all the targets that are going to Cooper Kupp and Puka. Otherwise, teams are just going to get them in condensed in the red zone, and they're not going to be able to score. Again, some of this I think they can scheme around. Some of that is going to be difficult because that would be where like the big X that I don't think they necessarily have would come into play. But to pull coverage. So Whittington was at 7% snaps, Tupu was at 19% snaps, and Tyler Johnson was at 14% snaps. 4 for 3 for 25 and a red zone opportunity. This is more stuff that tells me they don't know what they're doing. Colby Parkinson was at 16% snaps, way down. Hunter Long was at 13% snaps. Was expecting the usage flop to happen. It did happen. I don't know how valuable this is going to be outside of like really deep leagues. So Davis Allen goes all the way up to 80% snaps, 6 for 5 for 34, red zone opportunity, but only 16 air yards, which is not going to be surprising because like we know who the number 1 and number 2 are by a long shot with Puka and Cooper Kupp. The number 3 is probably going to be Demarcus Robinson, and then whatever's left is going to go to Davis Allen. No news when it comes to Tyler Higbee. eating into Davis Allen. I wouldn't be surprised if they gave Davis Allen the keys to see what he's got. If they are expecting like Tyler Higbee to come back. When it comes to the Ravens this week, the main news on this one would be Keaton Mitchell. He's finally back. 3% snaps, did do return duty in this one. Justice Hill, red zone carry, red zone target, so he's going to be stay in that like desperation RB2 range. Ali was out. If you're wondering on this one, and I'll bring this up because I did see some conversation about Deontay Johnson. He was down to 8% snaps, 2 targets, 1 for 6 in this one. If you're wondering about this, and then let's see, going back to the Ravens. So I would imagine that eventually we're going to get Deontay Johnson integrated in the offense. I would maybe guess like after week 14. If you're wondering, I think they're all wide receiver 3s. 83% snaps, 6 for 4 for 34. I already talked about this in the sausage. Rashad Bateman, 78% snaps, 8 for 6 for 54, a touchdown, 2 red zone opportunities. He got one of those, and then 85 air yards. So yeah, pretty close to you should be rolling out him on a week-to-week basis because he's attached to the offense. Nelson Aguilar, he was at 49% snaps. He had a red zone opportunity. He tugged on, and then I already talked about Tylan Wallace in Chasing the Dragon. 19% snaps, 3 for 3 for 115, and a touchdown in this one. And you're looking at like 85 yak is how he got there. So short route that he was able to take the distance. Mark Andrews again with Isaiah likely out, not yet practicing as of 10 hours ago. He does 87% snaps, 7 for 6 for 68, touchdown, red zone target, 69 air yards. And again, this is something that like probably should have been thought about with Isaiah likely being out, like the consolidation. This makes sense that this is why Mark Andrews was down, is because they have Isaiah likely. Now that we know that, let's see. Moving on to the Saints, and I did see some of the news that's coming out with the Saints that they had to actually come out and say that like, no, Chris Olave is not out for the season, because I was hearing that he was going to be out for the season. If you're wondering about that, now all the vacated opportunities, you're looking at Cedric Wilson being out with a shoulder. Bub Means is on IR. Mason Tipton, and this is one of the things that like was tracking on Mason Tipton maybe being a thing. Right here. So with all the vacated opportunities, his snaps go down to 55. No opportunities in this one. Let's see. Kevin Austin, he would be the guy right here that gets the uptick. I don't know anything about him. Like 49% snap, 2 for 2 for 36. Let's see. MVS, and I believe he's with the Bills on this one. If you're wondering about chasing MVS, and I already talked about him in Chasing the Dragon, like I'll never trust MVS again. 55% snaps, 3 for 3 for 109 and 2 touchdowns. Probably because of the vacated opportunities, would remain a dart throw next week. And then Juwan Johnson was at 58% snaps. Foster Moreau was at 83% snaps. Did have a red zone target. He tugged on that. So like you theoretically, if you're going to be chasing one of the Saints pass receivers right now, because of everything that's going on, like you could maybe guess Foster Moreau. Let's see. That's not right. Did not tug on that. 83% snaps, red zone target. That's all I have written down. He didn't tug on. Let's see. Taysom Hill in this one, and he did have an 88-yarder called back, if you're wondering about that. 43% snaps, 2 for 2 for 36. Also, 4 for 14, red zone carry, no passing yards to go along with this one. And then the Saints, Alvin Kamara, 81% snaps, 17 for 55, 6 for 5 for 54. 3 red zone carries, 2 red zone targets. They just went other places. Jordan Mims was at 15% snaps, red zone carry. So with all of this and the firing of Dennis Allen, the head coach, this was the news. Like Kendra Miller, supposedly one of the big issues that got Dennis Allen fired was that he put a healthy Kendra Miller on IR. And supposedly coming out of when Kendra Miller is off of IR, like the quote was full wheels up or whatever, like all gas, no brakes, whatever was said with Kendra Miller. So do with that with what you will. Moving on to Seahawks, only 2 things to talk about with them coming out of their bye week. Supposedly DK is supposed to be practicing this week. And then the other thing is, remember, Noah Fant is expected to miss again. So that would upgrade AJ Barner into like fringe tight end range. I still would be buying if you have the opportunity in your leagues, like the massive spike week that JSN had. I think there's a possibility you could get some of this to remain consistent with DK coming back and pulling coverage away from him. How he was used like slot fades and stuff like that. Like I could see some of that remaining somewhat consistent if they've decided that he's going to be the focal point of the passing game and allow DK to pull coverage. I could see that going forward if you have the opportunity. And you can buy JSN for a bag of chips. The owner wanting to get out from underneath him after the big spike week. Again, don't buy low, overpay if you like the guys and you need that like wide receiver 2. Take that chance going in the playoffs. All right, Steelers. So Najee, and I just didn't even see this popped up. Nursing ankle issue should play, if you're wondering. So 47% snaps, 21 for 53. He did score in this one. 5 red zone carries, 0 targets. I bring up the targets. So you're getting closer and closer to Jalen Warren being the more valuable guy in the offense. 45% snaps, 14 for 66. 2 for 2 for 29. Fumble lost in this one. 3 red zone carries. Cordero Patterson was at 10% snaps, 3 for 14. When it comes to Pickens, and I did talk about this with the Mike Williams trade, 81% snaps, 7 for 5 for 91, touchdown. That was on a red zone target. And again, this is all like basically like fades and slants, which is good for like Pickens and Mike Williams. Mike Williams, 32-yard touchdown pass late in the game to go along with this one. Wouldn't be chasing Muth, but he did have 2 red zone targets. He did tug on one of those. Texans, and again, this is a game they couldn't win when they forced 5 Jared Goff turnovers. So Nico Collins was activated, but then he was not active for game way. So like you could say healthy scratch, but he was a unhealthy scratch, I guess is the way you could put it, with all this stuff. So Tank Dell, 75% steps, 9 for 5 for 39 in this one, 77 air yards. I imagine he's going to be potentially a fringe wide receiver 2 when Nico comes back again, like taking advantage of some of the coverage that will be pulled to Nico. So if you're wondering about like trading him or getting rid of him, let's see. I don't have a lot else to say other than like Mechie may end up staying if he. Let's see how to back this up and talk about this. So Xavier Hutchins, he's at 84% snaps. He's filling the Nico Collins role in the offense. Bobby Trees was at 35% snaps. He did have a red zone target. So I would imagine that Meche and Tank Dell are going to be playing like the Z slot positions when they're out there in like their 3 wide receiver sets. And that's why I would generally say that I don't think like Xavier Hutchins is going to stay on the field in that big X role. Bobby Trees is probably going to be like the trustworthy guy in the offense. And it just comes down to like if they're going to stay with Tank Dell and John Meche in the 3 wide receiver sets in those like Z slot roles because they're smaller type guys. Like you could get a certain amount of the 65% snaps, like 60 to 80% snaps remaining consistent with John Meche. In this one, 65 or 6 for 5 for 74, touchdown on a red zone carry, 68 air yards. Yeah. And then you're just trying to shop the matchup. So like Dallas is probably a good matchup. Tennessee's maybe not. Jacksonville's just bad. But then you're looking at like maybe they're going to get in a certain amount of shootouts with Miami, the Chiefs, and Baltimore in the fantasy playoffs. That's what makes some of these guys a little bit more interesting. Dalton Schultz, he was at 71% snaps, 4 for 3 for 66, 50 air yards. So he should remain in lineups for the time being until we can figure this out. AJ Stover, 43% snaps, did have a red zone opportunity. Titans, and this is one of the main ones with Tajay Spears being back. 46% snaps, 7 for 47, 3 for 3 for 4 in this game. The red zone carry did go to Tony Pollard, if you're wondering, in this one. So like he's back to like fringe RB2 land because of usage. Tony Pollard, 54% snaps, 9 for 44, 4 for 4 for 19. That's why I say like I think that Tony Pollard is going to statistically have a similar season to what he did in 2023. And then Calvin Ridley, let's see, moving him up. Calvin Ridley, 9 for 5 for 84, 2 tugs, 141 air yards. That tug was a red zone tug, if you're wondering about that. or one of them was a red zone tug, if you're wondering about that. So like there might be a certain amount of consistency. The Vikings, again, could be a good week to be rolling out. Calvin Ridley could be a very ugly week when it comes down to that. Houston's probably a good week. Commanders, Jacksonville, Bengals, Colts, Jaguar. Yeah, I'd be rolling out Calvin Ridley a lot. It probably upgrades him. Nick Westbrook Akine at snap share is going to remain a wide receiver 3, 100% snaps. So like in your deeper leagues, he's going to be the guy that you can roll out if you're wondering about that. Sam Darnold has been somewhat disappointing, especially like with better matchups these last couple of weeks. So like Jacksonville and the Colts did get it done with the Colts. 3 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions when it comes to Jacksonville this week. And this would probably be the end of the roll when it comes to him trying to chase some of that stuff. If I can't trust him. Aaron Jones was at 52% snaps in this one. Limited with ribs right now. Let's see. And then that's where it gets a little interesting when Ty Chandler jumps up to 14% snaps, 4 for 18. And then the big one to be chasing, if you really need that guy, 31% snaps, 13 for 38, 1 for 1 for 9 when it comes to Cam Akers. No red zone opportunities that I tracked. And then the other one is they were in 2 tight ends. So Josh Oliver was at 68% snaps, 6 for 4 for 52. Some of that is, it looks like for the time being, TJ Hawkinson is just the receiving tight end. No change in overall snap share, 46% snaps, 9 for 8 for 72 in this one. 2 red zone opportunities, 66 air. So, and then Josh Oliver did have 66. So I wouldn't be chasing Josh Oliver, but obviously it was already the week to be rolling your TJ Hawkinson shares. So anyway, that's about what I got for after waivers this week, and I will be back with the grift on Sunday.